All right, I'm back, and here is the bike right here. It performed really well on the trip, and so the reason for this video is to kind of do a post-mortem on how I packed and what I used and what was successful and what was not, you know, on a trip that was basically 3,000 miles in 30 days up through the western United States. So this is probably a more important video than the initial reviews that I've done, simply because this has now been tested. Okay, so there's one thing to have a kind of pie in the sky view of what you think is going to work and then what actually works. Even though I put a lot of time and thought into what I brought, there's the reality of putting yourself in different situations in regards to traveling and the realities on a motorcycle. So what type of terrain? I mean, it was mostly freeway stuff because you can't help it, but there was many dirt trails I took. I also took some more moderately heavy pitted off-road especially up to Penny Pines, which is Northern California, outside of Lake Berryessa in the heat. So I'm going to try and go through it as quick as I can. So the video may be long anyways, and hopefully you can hang out for the most of it. So let's get into it. So we'll start with the bike itself. I guess I can start at the tail end. Having these LED brake lights that I put on here, I could probably do a separate video on that, but they're not that expensive, and I use PVC pipe, and with a relay, I set a relay up with the fuse box, so when you step on the brake pedals, they light up, which is really nice. What I'd like to do is do a voltage divider in there to where they're kind of low light running lights, and then when you press on the brakes, they go brighter, and that's probably an improvement I would do. As of right now, they're either off or they're on, and it's great though for braking. There's many times that I was riding at night, and just having that comfort level of extra bright stopping compared to just a small little dual sport light, which you don't know. I mean, sometimes packaging can go off and then it gets blocked. So just knowing that you have extra light in the rear is really kind of a safety thing. So, and it was relatively cheap. Like I said, PVC pipe, tapes, you know, I mean, it works, you know, at the end of the day, it works. The other thing was having this rear camera, which is kind of neat. The cameras, I have 3 cameras. I had one in the front facing back essentially, and one on my helmet, and one facing out the rear, more for safety. But camera management is a whole video unto itself because they're kind of a pain in the ass, you know. Even though I had connectors going to them, the front connector and the front camera halfway through the trip stopped working, and then you're sitting there going, well, you're trying to travel and you really want to dick with it to try and get it to work again. The batteries tend to kind of go out. They're just a whole kind of pain in the ass, but to get proper footage, you do have to spend time. But I would really like to research a more sometimes simpler camera solution to where I'm not juggling and managing the memory cards so much, because essentially you have to get the memory cards out on your computer, and it's just time consuming when you're just trying to just travel and see the scenery. So at some points I just kind of gave up and just said, nah, I'm driving, I'm not going to worry about so much the cameras. But overall the idea worked out well. This actually worked out well. When I plugged it in, it would face to the rear. 32 gigs, it would you know, I would travel for 6-7 hours a day, so it would only be good for 3 or 4 hours, and then you'd have to throw another memory card in. The racks worked out really well, really well and these are the Tusk racks. And I kept the solution simple with these with the rock straps, and they worked out well. Although I did one of the rock straps did bust off at one point and got caught in the rear tire. So the less straps in some ways, the better. So I just really paid more attention to how they snap in. Also, it's important to note that certain rock straps have different clips. So not all rocks, like you can't sometimes mix and match these. So they're kind of matched pairs. So you do have to watch out when you're buying them that you replace, you know, both ends to make sure that they clip in right. So that was one fatality as far as the straps go. And I learned that you really have to strap in well. The other thing too is that the other thing I learned is I lost several sets of glasses, and anything, it's not like a car. You think you can just set something temporarily down, like up over here or somewhere else in the bike, and it's going to stay there. It's not. So I learned the hard way that you pretty much have to have everything in bags, right? And these bags worked out real well, these Riggs ones. But having any loose items, you're better off just having them in bags. The more items you have kind of hanging around, the more of a chance of them falling off. Because the real problem is that when you're, like I dropped the bike once above Lake Berryessa, and I couldn't lift it up with all the bags. So you're undoing the bags, and then you're redoing the bags. And in the heat and everything, sometimes you forget to strap something in properly. So essentially the philosophy is less parts, less problems. So if we go back here, so the racks worked out really well. The exhaust, even though I have aftermarket exhaust, still gets really hot behind here. So that's initially where this bar used to be straight and then it melted. So what I did is just melted both ends so they would match. But I don't have the stock muffler. The disadvantage to not having the stock muffler is that it is loud. So getting up in the morning from campsites, it was really bad because it's blah 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 with a big piston. You're waking everyone up at 4 in the morning, which is kind of a dick move, but you have it, right? I mean, the stock muffler in this setup, I'm tempted to put the stock muffler back on. And the other reason why I'd have the stock muffler, first of all, as far as heat goes, this is going to protect you from touching the stock muffler. And nothing's going to be able to go around here anyways. Even with the aftermarket muffler, nothing can be around here. It's just going to melt. So whether you have the stock one or not, the argument for the stock muffler, even though it does get hot, it's super quiet, right? It is more weight, but shit, I have tons of weight anyway. So, you know what I mean? At a certain point, there's benefits. And on top of that, you're going into forest, you're going to forest areas that there could be forest fires. You never know if this can pass a spark, even though it has a spark, a silencer, spark arrestor. You just never know. So having that stock muffler, I'm kind of on the fence with it still. Also going down the road, it's so freaking loud in my helmet, I can't hear anything. So that's another downside. So I'm very tempted to put stock muffler on within this setup. In the Supermoto setup, which I'll be doing pretty soon, not so much, right? So anyways, going to the seat, I have this seat here, which is the Airhawk, and the Airhawk really well. It worked really well, although, like I said, it didn't matter how much. So I have this gel top that goes on top of it right here. And then you don't pump these up that much. Basically with these, you pump very little air into them. And they add that extra level of cushion above that, right? And even though I have a non-stock seat, which has more cushion, still, over time, man, your ass gets hurt. In fact, you can see where there's divots here where my cheekbones of my ass went into it. And that's always a challenge on a long trip. You know, your butt's just going to get sore, and you've got to learn to be able to take breaks or stand up on the bike to get blood circulating back into it. The Motoz rear tires, Adventure, I really enjoyed. They were great. And they lasted 7,000 miles. I did have to replace them in Portland, but they've really been a champ. So when I got a chance to buy another set in Portland, I did. What's great about Portland is they don't have sales tax. So I was able to get this for 150 bucks. So that really worked out well. So moving on, these crash buttons, especially when I drop the bike, and most of your drops are going to be low speed. So this is just enough to where when it dropped, it kept it off. It balanced the bike, and I actually like these because they don't add a whole lot of weight. But if you do crash, they kind of skittle along, and those are Supermoto setup. They're not that expensive. I think they were like $50 for the pair. So you have the one on that side and the other crash button over here. So they don't add the extra weight with the big bars and all that. So that's really cool. The other thing is these pedals. I got these pedals here, and they're just wide enough to where they're better than the stock, but they don't stick out like some of the other ones. So these little guys worked out really, really well, and I recommend them. I think you can get them for like $35 on Amazon. This one got a little scraped up over here. $35. I did have to clearance them a little bit to get them to fit right, and that's typical of like some Chinese stuff. But they were plenty strong, lasted the whole trip. I love them. Thumbs up. The other thing about the 690 is it does run hot, and I hear people complaining about how, oh, well, it runs hot, and they add the aftermarket temperature gauge to keep the fans running a little longer because the little heat light would come on in certain areas. But well, I think what I've read is a lot of people, these engines run hot for a reason because there's a higher heat coefficient, and it actually provides better cooling from the engine, believe it or not, when it runs a little hotter than the ambient temperature outside. That's the reason for it. There's a lot of German vehicles that are that way too. I think Audis and Mercedes. Typically, the engines run a little hotter because, believe it or not, you get with a higher engine temperature, you have a greater, believe it or not, a greater cooling coefficient. So that's why they do that. These little fuel friends on the outside, they work really well. And they, you get these from Germany, from Amazon.de, because they're German. But I mainly used them up front here, and they actually provided a little more wind protection from my knees, especially with colder nights out. So I kind of enjoyed that. They were good, and having this extra fuel in front to weight down the front was good. And originally I had fuel bottles up over here, but when I went through Lake Berryessa and the constant pounding and banging on the front, those fuel bottles eventually came off. So what I did is I just stuffed them in the rear bags. And I don't know, for really heavy riding, for freeway riding, they were fine up over here. They added that extra weight, but I'd have to figure out a newer system. And I was concerned too of losing this front fender with the extra weight on it. So I just kept this guy on, and that was fine. These elephant ears, they worked out really great. They're heated, although the heating is kind of a gimmick. It doesn't, with the heat, with the wind blowing around, there's only so much you can actually really feel the heat. The other problem is your stator, your stock stator on these motorcycles, I don't think charges the battery that well when you have running lights and you have all this heat on. They're not designed as well as, let's say, some of the heavier adventure bikes, which may have a bigger stator to handle all the power. So that's, you need to be aware of that with the 690, is the stock stator, it doesn't put out enough to run like all of the equipment that you would want it to. These mirrors worked out really well. The adventure mirrors, I have no complaints with those. This little windshield was, I can't say enough about it, was great. So I added this guy in originally, and this just takes a little bit off your shoulders, but does not block the view of the front of the motorcycle, which I really liked. The little phone holder here that I had, that worked really well, although it's plastic. That's kind of a concern, but it held on and it never broke, and so I was stoked on that. What else? Having the extra USB up front was good. I like the idea of having where you turn this on and then it reads out the voltage, which is kind of nice. So I could always see the state of the voltage, right? So you can see it and you go, oh, okay, my battery's still. The only downside is this would, you have to remember to turn it off. I don't have it running on ignition, so you always have to remember to turn it off. If not, you start to drain your battery. So I may hook it up differently in the future. The bar risers really worked out well, along with the dampener. And there's several times where I had a little bit of some tank slappers going on in the freeway, and I believe this the dampener played an integral role in that. Okay, we'll go on with the equipment that worked and didn't work. This bladder is money right here, okay? This is the Sea to Summit, and it's a 4-liter, and I packed it right behind the main tank area here, and it's strapped. It just had one strap where I could pull it back and then fuel up. But let me tell you, when I overheated, almost had heat stroke outside Lake Berryessa, having tons of extra water was super comforting. Like I said before, you can't have enough fuel, you can't have enough water. So that, along with my little pack that I had for the little water pack, these worked out well. So definitely money on that. Gloves. So I had 3 sets of gloves. I had an off-road set for touch and feel, and then I had a heavy road set. So if I knew I was doing a lot of freeway driving, I would put these heavier gloves on. And there's lighter gloves here, which were from Amazon. Believe it or not, actually, these are I love these gloves. I've wrecked on them several times. But they really protect. I like having lighter gloves that have the skid plate. Like, I can't stand having gloves on the freeway that don't have a skid plate. Even though when I crashed this one time, this actually gave me a blister underneath. At least it rode, and I didn't get what do you say, a road rash on my. So I think it's a must to have like a little skid plate on your gloves. You know, these I'm due for new ones, obviously, but I really like these gloves, and they weren't that expensive. I am definitely going to look for another pair. These guys are more expensive, and the only problem with these is the Velcro is kind of weak now, and every once in a while these like flip off while you're riding down the road, and they kind of dangle, which sucks. So I almost wish these would have buttons, you know. In fact, I may just install buttons on them. But they also have like the big plastic areas here in case you go down hard on the tar, you know. So I definitely believe in having that extra protection. I didn't really use these gloves at all, like I thought I would, you know. Let's see, the med kit was never used, thankfully. If I needed it, it would probably have been a big deal. I could probably go much smaller on this. Here's some arm guards that I used. I mainly bought these for like softball and stuff, but they really work well. I did use them every once in a while when it got really hot out. It's just a good way to protect your elbows, you know, and they're really cheap, and you can have like extra protection. Okay, this here is the neck gaiter. These neck gaiters are great. You can throw them up in your helmet when it's cold out. It would keep you warm. I had 2. I have this one that's kind of like a sport mesh type thing, and that's good for hotter weather, right? And you could wet it too. The other one I have is wool, and the wool one worked great at night. You got to have these, and I just brought 2 of them. I usually put them in my center area here. My center case area is where I would put them. So those are great. Like I said, this is in no order. I'm just going to go through this stuff because I kind of want to start packing away. This is the Air mattress that I got, and it comes with its own self-inflating little deal. It's cheap. It's called Big Boys Edition because I'm kind of a big boy. And this really worked out well. Used it all the time, and it's super strong. So yeah, I would recommend that. The other one I really liked is this Wise Owl pillow. I had 2. I had a blow-up pillow, which isn't as comfortable, but this little Wise Owl pillow, it's great. You can tuck it underneath, even though it's memory foam, and you can really smash it down. But it's really just kind of the comfort level. The comfort level was just awesome with this. So I do recommend this little Wise Owl pillow if you prioritize your sleep, which of course I do. The drones, I kept crashing the drones. All my drones are all fucked up. They're just bad, you know. Like I'm terrible with drones. But this this B-Wine drone. These are actually great because they're only 330 bucks. And if you're like me and you don't crash them, but they're cheap enough to where you can go full send on them out in the forest and not feel too bad about buying an $800 drone. And like I said, they come with the little gimbal, you know, automatically with a camera and all that. They aren't the greatest resolution or what have you, but they as far as frame rates, but they're good enough, and they come with this little case. So I like them, you know. I still like them. I think they're a reasonable price. Okay, continuing on here. What do we have here? Wool socks are a must, so I brought in many different items. I basically bought 3 pairs of clothes, which I thought was perfect. So 3 pairs of clothes. Also thermals. I brought some thermal. I can't tell you the thermals came in use because it does get cold, especially if you're driving at night, like I was outside the rainforest there in Seattle. The other thing is I brought this extra pants here that are the Alpine Stars. These are reasonable price, and when I felt like I was going to have a day that was going to be a little rough riding, I would definitely put this on as extra protection. Although when it got really hot out, I would not put these on because they'll just burn your nuts off having that many layers on. But when it was a little cooler out, having that extra protection I felt good about. This sleeping bag here was good. It worked well. It's a 0 degree bag. Let me pull it out. What I like about this bag, and it's the Teton Sports bag. It was under $100, I think, and it's a 0 degree bag. The inner liner here is softer. It's like a softer, I don't know. It's really a nice, like, poofy, soft material that puts you right to sleep. This is more plasticky on the outside, but it's a super wide and long bag, you know. And man, this really kept me warm all the way through, no matter where I was, whether it was at a little rest spot or what have you. This bag, it was money, and you could tuck it in and fold it and zip it up. I can't say enough about this. This is a great little bag. Is it a little bigger than most, like when fully packed? Yes. It comes with a compression bag, and it may not compress as most bags do, but you know, for me and the cost, it was, like I said, it was under $100. I'm not spending, for now anyways, $300 on a sleeping bag. I just had limited funds, so for this it was great. So highly recommend it. Moving on, I did use this large little poofed up pillow here. But like I said, it wasn't as comfortable. No matter how much air you put in it or don't put in it, it wasn't as comfortable as the memory foam one. So I didn't use this as much as a memory foam one. So I guess camping is your personal preference, you know. Like I said, wool socks. I brought several pairs of wool socks, and those are very useful, especially in cold weather. You need to have a several selection of heavy and light gear because you never know when the weather turns. Oh, here's the wool necking, and this is really thin, and but it came in a lot of use. Let me see, what's the name of that? Anyways, I recommend that. The little cooking pan, when I did use it, it was very useful to have. So even though it's a little bulkier, let me tell you, when you're cooking potatoes or just having the option to have a little cooking pan was good, and I would definitely take one again. It's what made Preston think that he had such a great trip too, because it's nice to be able to cook like real eggs and not just dehydrated stuff. Here was my rain jackets, and even though I went to the rainforest, I didn't really run into rain. Now, if I did, these little jackets would have come in use. The only other option is to stop, pull off the side of the road and wait for the rain to stop, or go to a restaurant or something. But I think if you were out somewhere, these could be a pivotal role in keeping you dry. So even though they were a little extra heavy, and I believe these are the same as the Hawk. These are the Hawk brand. And I know a lot of people, like, they're not name brand, but look, I think these were only like 25 bucks. You know what I mean? And they're plenty good. So for me, it was a good thing to at least have along, even though I didn't use them. I did have to buy extra wipes, and wipes are a must. This jacket came in use, so much in use. So it's kind of a fleece jacket, just a standard fleece one. I wish it did have pockets. It didn't have pockets. I could have benefited from pockets. But I use this fleece here, and also, like I said, the fleece legging underneath. And that's all I really needed to really stay super warm. So that was like the perfect setup. Going to my center console area, I have these. I have this Gili hat that I used, a floppy one I bought like at a street fair at some point. Man, I love this little hat. It's totally redneck. It folds up on the sides, but let me tell you, when you have the sun out and everything else, you want to take a break, this is a great hat to have. Even though it's totally dorky, it's very functional. This little side pouch I put on was great, but it I should have put the zipper more on this side. And also I need a better way of like strapping it on. But it actually worked out really well, and having this bottle here and this extra compartment that's readily available. The problem with these front cases is they're hard to zip up and zip off. And I actually lost my cap because this was open a little bit, and it flopped open, and then it flew, my cap flew out, which sucked. So I'd rather have like a little side compartment here for stuff like a bottle when I need to readily access it without having to unzip. Because you're going down the road, I need to be able to grab this and use it. And this actually worked out really well. But there's times where it got a little too flimsy, so I myself am going to work on a way to secure this a little more. But I definitely like having this extra container off to the side. Going on, my little Forceatt tent. This is a 3-man, and they say 3-man. 3-man is really a 2-man, if you think about it. Is it kind of large? Yeah, it's like I said, I'm approaching the large area. But let me tell you, having that bigger tent was nice. It was nice, and it kept the mosquitoes off. I had plenty of room to move around in there. I could actually sit in it with my chair. And here's my chair. It got eaten up by the rear tire. But I do like this chair here, this ultralight chair. I'm a bigger dude, so this King Camp chair actually worked out pretty well. And by the way, this tent sets up with the tent stakes. It sets up super fast. So I like that. The other thing is I did bring a tarp along, and this tarp was money because there's times the tents weren't allowed. So if you go to a rest stop, they'll specifically say there is no camping allowed. So, I mean, technically I probably could have, being on a motorcycle, would they have really given me a problem if I set up a tent? Maybe not, but still, I just didn't want to. The problem is there is an extra setup for this because you have to pull. A tarp is really easy. You just pull the tarp out. It's big enough. I wrapped it around the motorcycle, and it provided enough shelter, and it didn't look like technically I was camping. So that's kind of stealth. Also, initially I didn't have this, and when I set the tent up, especially outside of the Kern River Valley, there's a lot of stickers that would come up through here, and it actually kind of hurt some of the bottom of the tent. So to protect the tent, you really need to have a tarp that you can fold up underneath to protect from the ground if you want to keep your tent in good condition. So this really is a must. The Rigg's gear, all that got stuffed into this Rigg's Adventure gear duffel bags. I can't say enough about them. They're great. I even use them on non-motorcycle trips for like laundry. Like it's a great like dirty laundry bag, and because they're compression and you can really stuff them down. So even on my normal trips, like in the car, in the minivan, I use these. These are great. I love them. This little Nelson rig guy was on the rear of the motorcycle, and it really worked out well. It was hard sometimes to get my leg up over it, but it was easy to basically unclip and fold back to fuel up in the rear. I'd basically unclip the two front areas, and I could lift it up and just set it back, and then I could feel up, no problem. So this worked out really well because I was able to flip it back. I can get all of my toiletries. I could get to memory cards, extra batteries for the drone. I had my chain lube I picked up. I had extra food here. So I didn't have to unpack the saddlebags, which are harder to get to. I could just flip this up. I could get my DEET out, my what do you call it, sunblock stuff, whatever. I could go in and get these readily accessible and have a meal real quick and then zip it back up and then continue on down the road. So as far as a convenience factor, having this on the rear it worked out really, really well. Now, as far as this outside flashlight thing, here's another example of tying something outside, then losing it. So that at some point this opened up, and obviously dumb of me, but the flashlight came out and went down the road. So another example of, like, you shouldn't be tying things to the outside of things. You really just need to put it inside things. So period. I've learned that lesson the hard way. These bottles are great. I was able to stuff them anywhere. They were originally on the front of the vehicle, and I just stuffed them in, and I used these several times. So I did. There were several instances where I went one area where the ATM card, even though that wouldn't work, and I was way out in Washington, and I couldn't get fuel into the with the vehicle. So fortunately, I was able to fuel up and go further on down the road with the extra fuel. So, you know, you really can't count on, even though there may be a gas station. My general thing is there's usually gas stations there, but whether they're fully functional or take your form of payment, and sometimes it's at, like in this case, it was at night. So this, you know, there's no one to talk to at the store. So anyways, I was able to dump in fuel, go further down the road, and I wasn't stuck there. Now, shoes, I just brought tennis shoes, and I brought some flip-flops, and then I had my full-blown Enduro boots. And the majority of the time, of course, riding was the Enduro boots. But having, going out to dinner with family and friends, having an extra pair of shoes, just some comfortable sneakers, or if I went for a hike, having sneakers is good. And flip-flops are just convenient to have. So flip-flops are able to tie on the outside, and so those actually came in use. These O'Neill boots, even though they were cheap, you know, originally like $100, and I'm missing the front toe area now. You can see they're getting fairly well. You know, they've totally worked. They've really worked out well. They're super comfortable, man. I really like them, you know. And I know you can get, there's probably more expensive boots out there, but for my purposes, these O'Neills work perfectly fine, you know. They did, you know, other than being a cheaper brand. And like I said, if you can just overlook brand names, if you go, oh, O'Neill, that's where all the noobs wear O'Neill. I don't give a shit, okay? I just ride them, and they provided plenty of protection so far, and for the price, I mean, how can you beat it? In the end, like I said, I'd like to have the best quality stuff I can, but there's a limit to how much I can spend. At least I'm not, you know, I can't spend a huge amount of money. Same with the knee guards. Like, I've wrecked several times on these, not on this trip, but I've slid before on them, and they're good enough, you know. These are good enough, and they're, like I said, they're not so stiff to where they'll lock your knee out or cause problems. If they have to, they'll actually break away. So these have been pretty good, and they're only about $100. These Rigg bags, they work really well. They didn't tear apart at all, you know. So for my purposes, these little Rigg gear bags work really well. So, and they have this little reflector on back for more visibility. So these work good too. So overall, how did the 690 perform? It performed really, really well. How was the buzziness? So the buzziness was there. One thing I found though is about 74 miles per hour with these set of tires and all that, buzziness wouldn't occur. Even though it has dual counterbalancers, after a while your hand does get kind of numb, you know. But at certain frequency ranges, there is no buzzing at all. And most of the time, my strategy was to sit in between wolf packs on the freeway and just cruise, you know. And really, it's about being conservative when you're driving. But being a single cylinder, there's many times where I was going about 80, 83 miles per hour consistently, especially all the way back from Seattle. I did Seattle to outside Sacramento with breaks in between, 14 hours. I had about 3 hours sleep and then took off from Sacramento down to San Diego again. And with breaks in between, that was about another 11 hours. So, and that was just running full steam on the bike. So, engine's smooth, it runs great. You have plenty of power on the freeway. Even if I was going 80, there was times where I had this one person that somehow was getting pissed off or what have you, and I wasn't going fast enough for him for some reason. I just wanted to get away from him. So I pegged it. I went up to 100, you know, and just got way ahead of him and said, basically, F you, I'm out of here. Like, it has that type of power. So it definitely can compete. Now, as far as like how firm it was, road handling, there are times like seams on the road with a lighter bike like this, you can hit it and it'll jostle a little bit. I got used to the seams on the road. I think there was a little bit of a wavering on this bike, but I think that's more of the fork setup in front. Either they aren't torqued right, I don't have the dampening set exactly right, but I felt safe on the bike. The bike auto-corrected, it goes the proper speeds, and it's smooth. And having the bags positioned the way I did, where they were kind of diamond shaped, helped cut through. Having a little extra weight up front was super helpful. So overall, I would say the bike really performed very, very well. Rooms for improvement, like I said, would be the camera system. As far as the bike goes itself, the little cruise control that I had here, the inner guts of it kind of spilled out. It's a cheaper cruise control, but having a better cruise control for the money would be nice, because there's times where, like I said, your right hand, you got to be able to at least pull off for a little bit and get the blood going back, you know. So that could be a room for improvement. Other than that, like I said, I had this tire replaced up front. It's more road bias. Well, I forget what it was. It was cheap enough, but I'd like to have a little more knobs on it. But for now, the type of riding I was doing, it looks like it'll do well. So thanks for watching. Sorry this is so long-winded, but that's kind of like the post-mortem on my trip and how things went. Overall, it was very life-altering, going 3,000 miles and just all the different scenery and being alone on the bike and the times I've had. I'm going to remember it for a very long time. My next video is going to be me putting this bike into a supermoto setup. And that supermoto setup, you can see here, I have my street tires, okay, up on the ceiling here, where I have them stored. So I'll be putting this bike and cleaning it up and putting it into a supermoto setup for the summer, which will be a lot of fun. And that's what makes this bike very unique too, is I can do different setups with it, which I really like. All right, thank you for watching.